I found out my dad had another family for over 30 years because a dying child needed bone marrow, and suddenly strangers were calling us relatives we never knew existed. Up until that moment, my biggest family stress was whether my mom would finally convince my dad to repaint the living room. We were ordinary in the most boring way possible. Holidays at the same dining table in Salem, Oregon. Same jokes. Same arguments. Same rhythm that made you think nothing truly catastrophic could ever happen here. My name is Megan Hart. I'm 32, I coordinate community programs at a public library in Eugene, and for most of my life I would have described my father as steady. Not warm exactly, but dependable. The kind of man who fixed broken things without complaining and showed love through practical stuff like changing your oil or replacing your tires before winter. 2 months ago, my brother Owen sent a message in our family group chat that just said, "Does anyone know a Travis Cole?" Chloe replied with a question mark. I said no. Mom didn't respond at all, which wasn't unusual because she hated texting. Dad wasn't in the chat, he never bothered with it. Then Owen posted a screenshot. It was a Facebook message request from a man we'd never seen before. Mid-30s, baseball cap, standing next to a little boy on his profile photo. Nothing weird about him at first glance. Just some guy. But the message itself made my chest tighten. He wrote that he believed Robert Hart, our father, was also his father. He said he had confirmed it through a DNA testing service. He apologized for contacting us out of nowhere, but said he had no other options because his son was critically ill and needed a bone marrow transplant. He included details. Specific ones. Our mom's name, Diane. The street we lived on when we were kids. The high school Owen attended. The year Dad started working at Northwest Freight Logistics. Not vague guesses. Exact. My first reaction was annoyance, not fear. Like, great, someone did a deep dive internet search and is trying some elaborate scam. I typed, block him. Owen didn't answer for a minute. Then he sent another screenshot. More messages from Travis. And photos. The first one looked like it had been taken in the late 80s or early 90s. A younger version of my dad stood outside what looked like an apartment complex. His hair was darker, fuller, but it was unmistakably him. Same nose. Same posture. Same half-smile that never quite reached his eyes. Next to him was a woman none of us recognized. She had a hand on his arm, leaning in close like they belonged together. And in his arms was a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. My stomach flipped so violently I had to sit down on the edge of my bed. The timestamp on the photo read 1989. Owen called me immediately. "Meg," he said, voice tight, "tell me that's not Dad." I couldn't. Because it was. Chloe joined the call a minute later, already crying even though none of us had said the words out loud yet. We just kept staring at the image like if we looked long enough it would morph into something else. It didn't. There were more photos. A toddler on a swing with Dad pushing him. A birthday cake with 2 candles. Christmas morning in what was very obviously not our house. A whole timeline of moments we were never part of. That night, Owen drove down from Springfield and Chloe came up from Salem. We didn't tell our parents why. We just said we wanted dinner together. Mom seemed happy about it. Dad grilled chicken like always, humming to himself like nothing in the universe was wrong. Watching him move around the kitchen made something inside me twist painfully. Because either this man was innocent and being framed in the most elaborate way imaginable, or he had been lying to us for our entire lives. After dinner, Owen pulled out his phone. "Dad," he said carefully, "can you look at something?" Dad wiped his hands on a dish towel and leaned over. His expression was neutral at first, mildly curious. Then he saw the photo. I will never forget how his face changed. It wasn't explosive or dramatic. It was worse than that. It was like someone unplugged him. The color drained out of his skin, his shoulders dropped, and he sat down heavily in the nearest chair without being asked. Mom looked between us, confused. "What is it?" No one answered. Finally, Owen asked, very quietly, "Do you know this woman?" Dad stared at the phone for a long time. So long that I started to hear the ticking of the wall clock in the dining room. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might bruise my ribs from the inside. Then he said one word. "Yes." Mom laughed. Not because it was funny, it was that brittle, disbelieving laugh people make when their brain refuses to process what they just heard. "From work?" she asked. "Some old colleague?" Dad didn't look at her. He kept staring at the table like it might split open and swallow him. "I had an affair," he said finally. "A long time ago." The room went so quiet it felt airless. Mom didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stood there, hands gripping the back of a chair so tightly her knuckles went white. Dad kept talking in this flat, hollow voice, like he was reading a confession he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in his head but never expected to say out loud. Her name was Elaine Brooks. They worked together in the accounting department when he was still new at the company. It started as lunches, then turned into something else. He swore it didn't last long. A few months, maybe. Then she got pregnant. "I ended it," he said quickly, like that part mattered. "But I couldn't just walk away. I sent money. I helped when she needed it." Mom finally spoke. Her voice was barely audible. "For how long?" Dad hesitated. "Years." It felt like the word echoed around the room. Owen swore under his breath. Chloe started sobbing outright. I couldn't make any sound at all. My throat felt like it had closed. And the child? Mom asked. The baby in the photo? Dad nodded without lifting his head. A boy, he said. His name is Travis. Travis. The name from the message. Suddenly the stranger on Facebook wasn't a stranger anymore. He was sitting somewhere out there in the world, breathing, living a life that intersected with ours in ways we'd never known. Mom walked out of the room without another word. We heard her go upstairs. A door closed, then locked. She didn't come down the next morning, or the day after that. Dad slept on the couch. Owen paced like a caged animal. Chloe refused to look at him at all. I went back to Eugene for work but couldn't focus on anything. Every quiet moment was filled with the same thought. While we were growing up, Dad was growing up another child too. Every soccer game he attended for us might have been preceded by one for someone else. Every work trip might have been a visit to a different life. About a week later, Travis messaged again. Not pushy, not angry, just patient. He said he understood if we needed time, that he wasn't looking for money or a relationship. Only medical testing, because his son Noah had a severe bone marrow disorder and close genetic matches gave the best survival odds. I stared at that message for a long time before replying. Eventually, I typed, "Can we talk on the phone?" He called within seconds. His voice surprised me. Not hostile, not entitled, just exhausted in a way that sounded bone deep. "Thank you for even answering," he said. "I didn't want to do this. I just don't know what else to try." He told me Noah had been in and out of Boise Children's Medical Center for months. That the donor registry hadn't found a match yet. That doctors suggested contacting paternal relatives as a last resort. "I'm not trying to hurt your family," he said quietly. "I swear. If there were any other way, I'd take it." I didn't know what to say. I kept picturing a 6-year-old kid in a hospital bed, connected to machines, while the adults around him scrambled for miracles. Meanwhile, my own family was disintegrating. Mom barely spoke to Dad except in short, icy sentences. Chloe refused to visit the house at all. Owen swung between wanting to punch something and wanting to pretend none of this existed. And Dad. I caught him crying in the garage one night. Not loud sobbing. Just silent tears while he stared at a toolbox like he didn't recognize his own hands. "I never stopped loving your mother," he said when he realized I was there. "I thought I could handle it. Take care of everyone without hurting anyone." But he had. He had hurt everyone. Just slowly, invisibly, like rot inside a wall. After I hung up with Travis, I sat in my car for almost an hour, engine off, hands frozen on the steering wheel. Somewhere out there was a child who might die if we did nothing. And somewhere behind me, in that quiet house in Salem, was my mother, a woman who had built her entire life around a marriage that turned out to be only half real. I had no idea which direction would hurt less. And I was starting to realize that maybe there wasn't one. For the first week after the confession, it felt like our house had been evacuated while everyone was still physically inside it. Mom stayed upstairs almost constantly. She didn't scream or throw things or demand answers the way you see in movies. She just withdrew. When she did come down, it was to make tea or pick at toast, moving through the kitchen like a guest who didn't want to disturb anyone. Dad tried to act normal at first. He still mowed the lawn. Still checked the mail. Still asked if anyone needed groceries. But there was this hollow look in his eyes, like he was walking around in a place he used to live but no longer belonged. Owen stopped speaking to him entirely. Chloe refused to even enter the house unless Mom specifically asked her to come over, and even then she would time it for when Dad was out running errands. I went back and forth between Eugene and Salem, mostly because I couldn't stand being alone with my thoughts in my apartment. One night, Mom asked me to sit with her in the living room after Dad went to bed on the couch. The lamp was the only light on. It cast these long shadows across the walls, making the room feel unfamiliar, like someone else's house. "I keep replaying everything," she said quietly. "Every year of our marriage. Trying to figure out when he was somewhere else." I didn't know how to answer that. She stared at her hands. "Do you remember when he used to travel to Boise? Back when you were little?" I nodded slowly. He'd said it was for logistics conferences or supplier meetings. He always brought back cheap souvenirs, keychains, snow globes, once a stuffed bear wearing a hoodie that said Idaho in giant letters. My stomach turned. "That's where she moved," Mom said. "He told me tonight." So it hadn't just been a fling that ended. It had continued. Quietly. Logistically. Efficiently. Like a second job no one else knew he had. "How long?" I asked. She gave a humorless little smile. "Long enough." The worst part wasn't even the affair itself. It was the scale. The planning. The sustained deception. This wasn't one terrible mistake. It was thousands of small, deliberate choices stacked on top of each other for decades. The next day Owen showed up unexpectedly, looking like he hadn't slept. "I did some digging," he said, tossing his phone onto the kitchen table. On the screen was a photo of Travis as an adult. No baseball cap this time. Just a regular guy with tired eyes and a neutral expression. He looked normal. Not like some villain who'd invaded our lives. Just a person. His mom died last year, Owen said. Car accident. Mom's head snapped up. Dead? Yeah. Which is probably why he finally reached out. Nothing stopping him anymore. That landed heavily. Elaine Brooks, the woman who had existed like a ghost on the edge of our family, was gone. Whatever agreement she and Dad had maintained all these years had died with her. Owen scrolled to another photo. Travis standing beside a woman with dark hair and a tight smile, holding a little boy between them. The kid was grinning at the camera, front teeth missing, cheeks round in that way kids have before they grow into their faces. Noah, Owen said flatly. That's the kid. I felt something twist in my chest. Because he didn't look like a symbol of betrayal. He just looked like a 6 or 7-year-old who probably liked dinosaurs and cartoons and didn't understand why he spent so much time in hospitals. Mom pushed the phone away like it burned her. I don't want to see them. But later, I caught her standing alone at the table, staring at the same photo when she thought no one was looking. A few days after that, Dad asked if he could talk to all 3 of us together. Not Mom, just us. We sat in the den, the air thick with tension. He looked smaller somehow, shoulders rounded, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were pale. There are things you deserve to know, he said. None of us responded. He explained that Elaine had refused to let him be publicly involved. She didn't want to be the other woman forever, didn't want judgment from coworkers or neighbors. So they agreed he would provide financial support and occasional visits, but no official acknowledgement. He had my last name? Owen asked sharply. Dad shook his head. No. She gave him hers. Cole. Of course she did. That made everything easier to hide. He knew about us? Chloe whispered. Dad swallowed. Eventually. When he was older. So somewhere out there was a boy growing up knowing his father had another family that came first. I tried to imagine what that must have felt like and couldn't. I stopped visiting when he was in high school, Dad said. It became complicated. He didn't want me there anymore. That part hurt in a different way. Not because it excused anything, but because it meant the damage went both directions. There wasn't one clean victim and one clean villain. Just a mess that spread outward and kept going. Owen leaned forward. And you thought this would never come out? Dad didn't answer right away. I hoped, he said finally. Hope. Like this had all been a weather pattern he could wait out. What about now? I asked. What do you want us to do? He looked at me then, really looked, eyes red and raw. I want that child to live, he said. That's all. Chloe made a choking sound. So, we're just supposed to fix your mistake? I'm not asking you to forgive me. But you're asking us to clean up after you, Owen shot back. Dad flinched like he'd been slapped. Later that night, I went back to Eugene because I couldn't breathe in that house anymore. Everything felt contaminated, like every memory had been quietly rewritten. A few days later, Travis texted asking if I had time to talk again. I almost ignored it. Then I pictured Noah's missing front teeth and typed yes. This time he put me on speaker with his partner, Laura. Her voice was careful, polite, but I could hear the strain underneath. They explained the transplant process. How testing worked. How being a match didn't automatically mean surgery. There were steps, evaluations, options. We know this is a lot, Laura said softly. We're running out of time. In the background, I heard a child's voice asking if he could watch something on TV. Travis muted the phone for a second, answered him gently, then came back. That normal domestic sound, a kid negotiating screen time, almost broke me. Because it was so ordinary. So unfairly ordinary. I didn't want to do this through messages, Travis said. You deserve to hear from a real person. I hesitated, then asked the question that had been sitting in my throat since all this started. Did you know about us growing up? There was a pause. Yeah, he said quietly. My mom told me when I was about 10. What was that like? Another pause, longer this time. Confusing, he admitted. I wasn't supposed to contact you. Ever. So he'd lived with the mirror image of our situation, knowing we existed while we were completely unaware of him. After we hung up, I sat on my couch staring at nothing for a long time. It felt like 2 parallel worlds had collided, and now everything was bent out of shape where they overlapped. Back in Salem, the divide kept widening. Owen started talking about getting tested without telling Mom. Chloe said that would be a betrayal she could never forgive. Mom said nothing at all, which somehow felt worse than either option. And Dad, he stopped trying to justify anything. He just moved through the house like a ghost, polite and careful and unbearably sad. One evening, I found him in the backyard staring at the old swing set he'd built when we were kids. The wood was weathered now, chains rusted, seat cracked from years of disuse. I used to push you on that for hours, he said without turning around. I didn't answer. There was another one, he added quietly. At their apartment complex. The image hit me so hard, I had to look away. 2 swing sets. 2 childhoods. One man moving between them like it was sustainable. I thought I could keep everything separate, he said. I thought I was protecting all of you. But secrets don't stay contained. They wait. They expand. They detonate when the timing is worst. And now the fallout was everywhere, in hospital rooms hundreds of miles away, in the hollow silence of our family home, in the space between siblings who suddenly didn't agree on what being a good person even meant anymore. I went back to my car that night feeling like the ground under my life had shifted just enough that nothing would ever sit flat again. Because this wasn't just about what Dad had done. It was about what we were supposed to do now that we knew. The first time I saw Noah in person, he was trying to race a plastic dinosaur across a hospital waiting room floor using an 4-pole as a starting gate. It was such a normal kid thing to do that for a split second I forgot why I was there. Then he coughed this thin, dry sound that didn't belong to someone his age, and Laura gently steered him back into a chair, checking the tubing in his arm with automatic precision. Boise Children's Medical Center smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. The kind of smell that seeps into your clothes and follows you home. I hadn't told my mom I was coming. I told Owen. He said he understood. Chloe said if I went, she didn't want to hear about it. Dad didn't say anything, he just hugged me longer than usual, like he was afraid I might disappear too. The flight from Eugene to Boise felt surreal, like I was traveling to a parallel universe where my life had taken a different turn decades ago. Travis met me at the hospital entrance. He looked exactly like the photos, but more worn down in person. Stubble he probably hadn't had time to shave, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders tense like he was bracing for impact. For a second, we just stood there awkwardly, two strangers with the same father trying to figure out how to exist in the same space. Hi, he said finally. Hi. Same voice from the phone. Same exhaustion. He didn't try to hug me. I was grateful for that. Inside the waiting room, Laura stood up when she saw us. She gave me a small, cautious smile, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be relieved I'd actually come. This is Noah, she said softly. Noah looked up from his dinosaur. His eyes were bright, curious, completely unguarded. Are you the cousin? He asked. The word hit me in the chest. Cousin. Not aunt. Not stranger. Something in between that felt both accurate and deeply wrong. Something like that, I said, forcing a smile. He accepted that without question and went back to his game. Kids are amazing that way. They don't interrogate reality the way adults do. They just incorporate new information and move on. Up close, the signs of illness were harder to ignore. The pale skin. The faint bruising around the foresight. The way Laura kept glancing at him every few seconds, like she was counting his breaths without meaning to. Travis led me down a hallway to a small consultation room so we could talk privately. I can't thank you enough for coming, he said immediately. I know this is insane. It is, I admitted. We sat across from each other at a tiny table that made everything feel even more uncomfortable, like we were kids forced to share a desk. I don't expect anything, he said. Even testing. I just thought, if you saw him. He trailed off. If I saw him. As if the reality of a sick child might override decades of betrayal. It probably did. I had a good life, he added quietly. My mom wasn't perfect, but she loved me. I didn't grow up resenting you guys. I barely thought about it most of the time. That surprised me. I figured you'd hate us, I said. Why would I? He asked, genuinely confused. You didn't do anything. The simplicity of that statement made my throat tighten. Because he was right. None of us had chosen this. But we were all trapped in it anyway. A doctor joined us, Dr. Samuel Reeves, calm voice, gentle manner, the kind of person who's probably had to deliver too many terrible conversations to count. He explained the transplant process in clinical terms. Compatibility percentages. Risks. Recovery time. The possibility that none of us would be a match anyway. Testing doesn't obligate you to donate, he emphasized. It only tells us what options exist. Logically, it sounded reasonable. Almost simple. Emotionally, it felt like stepping onto a path that only went in one direction. Afterward, Travis showed me around the ward. Kids in masks. Parents sleeping upright in chairs. Cartoon murals on the walls trying desperately to soften something that couldn't really be softened. Noah waved when we passed his room. He'd switched from dinosaurs to a tablet game, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. Does he know? I asked. Not really, Travis said. He knows he's sick. He knows doctors are trying to help. That's about it. Probably for the best. Before I left, Noah ran up to me and handed me a sticker shaped like a rocket ship. For coming, he said seriously. I stuck it on my sleeve because I didn't trust my voice. On the flight home, I kept staring at that sticker until the edges started to peel. Back in Oregon, everything felt smaller. Quieter. Like the world had narrowed to a single unbearable decision. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. She looked at my sleeve immediately. What's that? I froze. A sticker, I said weakly. Her eyes moved from the rocket ship to my face. Something in her expression shifted, not anger, not shock. Just this deep, exhausted understanding. You went, she said. It wasn't a question. I needed to see, I said. She nodded slowly, staring down at the table. Was he very sick? Yes. That one word seemed to drain what little energy she had left. She folded her hands in front of her, fingers trembling slightly. I don't blame the child, she said after a long silence. I never did. But there was a second sentence hanging unspoken in the air. I blame your father. And this situation. And maybe myself for not seeing it. Chloe called later that night, voice sharp with anxiety. Tell me you didn't agree to anything. I didn't, I said. I just went. She exhaled shakily. Meg, if you get involved, this will never end. He'll always be connected to us. He already is, I said before I could stop myself. That didn't go over well. Owen was quieter about it. He admitted he'd been considering getting tested himself, but hadn't gone through with it yet. I keep thinking about Mom, he said. And then I think about the kid. And then I feel like a terrible person no matter what. Same. Dad didn't ask what happened. He just listened while I described the hospital, the doctor, the waiting rooms. When I mentioned Noah's dinosaur race, he covered his mouth with his hand like he was trying to physically hold something in. He likes dinosaurs? He asked hoarsely. Yeah. Dad nodded, eyes shining. Travis did too. Of course he did. It was like pieces of a hidden past kept surfacing whether we wanted them to or not. That night I lay awake replaying everything: Noah's smile, Mom's hollow eyes, Chloe's fear, Owen's anger, Dad's quiet desperation. No matter what choice I made, someone I loved was going to be hurt. And the worst part was realizing that doing nothing was also a choice. Because somewhere in Boise, a little boy was sleeping in a hospital bed, trusting that the adults around him would find a way to make him better. And one of those adults was my father. The same man who had created the situation in the first place. A few days later, Travis texted me a photo. Noah wearing a paper crown from the hospital playroom, grinning despite the tubes taped to his arm. Bad day yesterday. Better today. I stared at the image for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard, unsure what response was even appropriate. Finally, I typed. I'm glad he's smiling. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then his reply came through. We're running out of time. I put my phone down and pressed my hands against my eyes until everything went dark. Because for the first time, the clock wasn't theoretical anymore. It was ticking. The official testing kit arrived in a plain cardboard box with no hospital logos, no alarming warnings, nothing that hinted at how much weight it carried. Just a return label. A set of instructions. A sterile swab sealed in plastic. It sat on my kitchen counter in Eugene for 3 days while I walked past it pretending it wasn't there. Like if I didn't open it, time might slow down. Like indecision itself was some kind of action. Travis hadn't pressured me after sending it. No follow-up messages. No guilt. Somehow that made it worse. On the 4th morning, Owen showed up unannounced. He looked at the box, then at me. You too. You got one. He nodded, rubbing the back of his neck. Came yesterday. We stood there in my tiny kitchen, both staring at identical packages like they were explosives. Have you told Mom? I asked. Are you kidding? He said. She'd fall apart. He wasn't wrong. Mom had started moving through the days like she was underwater. She still cooked, still cleaned, still answered the phone when relatives called, but everything about her felt muted. Like she'd turned down the volume on her own life just to survive it. Dad, meanwhile, had stopped trying to justify anything. He was almost careful, polite to a fault. He asked permission before entering rooms. He thanked Mom for meals she barely spoke during. It was unbearable to watch. I keep thinking about the kid, Owen admitted quietly. Then I think about Mom. Then I want to punch a wall. Same, I said. We didn't open the boxes. Instead, we drove back to Salem together, neither of us saying it out loud, but both knowing we couldn't make this decision in isolation anymore. Mom was in the living room when we arrived, folding laundry with mechanical precision. Dad was outside trimming hedges, the buzzing sound drifting faintly through the walls. She looked up surprised. You didn't say you were coming. Owen set his box on the coffee table. Mine followed. Mom's hands stilled. What are those? She asked, even though I think she already knew. Testing kits, Owen said bluntly. The silence that followed felt physical, like pressure building in the room. For the boy, she asked. Yes. She stared at the boxes for a long time. Not touching them. Not pushing them away. Just looking, like they were something fragile and dangerous at the same time. I won't stop you, she said finally. Owen blinked. You won't. Her mouth trembled slightly. I don't want a child to die because of something I can't bear. Relief washed through me so suddenly it almost made me dizzy, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved at all. But, she continued softly, I can't be part of it. That landed harder than anything else. She wasn't forbidding us. She wasn't endorsing us. She was stepping outside the entire situation, like it was something happening to strangers. Dad came in a few minutes later, dirt on his hands, confused by the tension. When he saw the boxes, he froze. You don't have to do this, he said immediately. I never wanted. Stop, Owen snapped. Just stop talking. Dad closed his mouth. No one said what we were all thinking, that everything about this traced back to him. That night, the 5 of us ate dinner at the same table for the first time since the confession. No one tasted the food. Forks scraped against plates. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Afterward, Chloe pulled me aside in the hallway. If you do this, she whispered, eyes shining with tears, things will never go back to normal. They're not normal now, I said gently. She shook her head. This makes it permanent. He'll always be part of us. He already was. In DNA, in history, in the shape of Dad's face reflected in someone else's. Later, I found Mom standing alone in the kitchen, staring out the dark window. "I keep thinking about the day we got married," she said quietly. How certain I was about everything. I didn't know how to respond to that kind of grief. "I don't hate that child," she added. "But every time I picture him, I also picture the lie." Her voice cracked on the last word. The next morning, Owen and I sat at the dining table with the kits between us. Dad hovered in the doorway like he wanted to disappear. Chloe stayed upstairs. Mom didn't come out of the bedroom. Neither of us moved. "What if we're not matches anyway?" Owen said after a while. "Then at least we tried." "And if we are?" I didn't answer. Because that was the real question. If we were matches, the decision would become real in a way it wasn't yet. No more hypotheticals. No more distance. Just yes or no. Owen picked up the swab, turned it over in his fingers, then set it back down. "I hate him," he said quietly. "Not the kid. Dad. I know. But I also keep thinking, what if this was us? What if one of us needed help and the only people who could give it were strangers who didn't want anything to do with us?" That thought had been haunting me too. In the end, neither of us could bring ourselves to do it there, in that house full of ghosts and expectations. Owen took his kid home. I took mine back to Eugene. Days passed. Travis didn't text. I didn't text him either. The silence stretched until it felt like a living thing. Then one evening, a message finally appeared on my phone. A photo of Noah asleep in a hospital bed, cheeks flushed, one hand clutching a stuffed dinosaur. "He asked if you were coming back," Travis wrote. I stared at the words until they blurred. I thought about Mom folding laundry with empty eyes. About Chloe's fear. About Owen pacing his living room at midnight. About Dad standing alone in the backyard like he didn't know where he belonged anymore. I thought about a little boy waiting for people he barely understood to decide whether he would live or die. My thumb hovered over the screen. There was no choice that didn't hurt someone. No version of this where everyone walked away intact. In the end, all I typed was, "I don't know what to do." The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally, his reply came through. "Neither do I." I set the phone down and looked at the unopened kit on my table, the cardboard edges slightly worn from being moved around but never opened. Outside, the evening was completely ordinary. Cars passing. A dog barking somewhere down the street. Someone laughing in another apartment. The world hadn't stopped. It never does. But mine felt suspended, balanced on a decision I still hadn't made, one that could save a child, destroy my mother, or maybe both at the same time. And the worst part was knowing that eventually, not choosing would become a choice too. I just didn't know which kind of person that would make me.